This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, you can only read, and I'm getting used to this thing here now.
Yeah,
We thought they were touch screens.
Yeah.
you can touch them all you want.
It ain't gonna do anything, but you can touch it.
I thought they were.
Weird angle.
Mine's on, John.
Yeah.
Oh, I remind me, I get some girls. That's fine. Hey, I'm surprised you're in the picture. That might be them.
The lights on the front. Is that right?
Be careful. Get the voice right with the facial expressions.
Start at 6.
Yeah, Michael. But you're running around. Sit down. June 28th, council meeting be called to order. Would you please stand for the pledge of allegiance and moment of silence?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on the agenda will be consider approval of the consent agenda items, approved minutes from the June the 14th meeting, and statement of the bills paid in an amount of $74,664.67.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and second to approve the consent agenda. With the clerk, please call roll.
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stites.
Yes.
Oh. I thought you were fixing the microphone. but-
Next item on the agenda, requests or comments from the public. No one is present. Zach, do we have a letter? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we actually had two comments come in via email earlier this afternoon. I'll read them in the order that they were received. This is from Dan Saran, South 110th Street and Kansas Avenue. I'm once again writing to you all I'm once again writing to all of you currently holding office to voice my common sense opinion for asking that our streets be repaired or replaced before any thoughts of new offices for city fire, police administrations. Make that area a year-round recreation area for the many children that live around there. They need recreation. Number one, the north end has large holes in our streets that kids ride bicycles on every day that they could crash into, liabilities. Number 2, we had a fire station built for the north end response. Train's delay happens. That is now an unattractive street maintenance yard at the entrance of our subdivision. We want that taken back to the river with a cheap office and gravel yard to store the many pieces of street equipment and supplies. Houses are selling in this area and nobody wants a street maintenance yard at that area of their subdivision. Thank you for your time and consideration regarding public safety first budgeting. Please hear our voices, City Council and Administration. The next comment comes from Dave Johnson, 1205 South 102nd Street. My opinion, before any new city hall, police, and fire stations get built, roads must be fixed. 102nd Street for starters, Swartz, Riverview, Richland, to name a few more that are in terrible condition. Roadways in Edwardsville north of K32 need fixed right and not cheaply bandaged. Those are the only comments that came in, Mr. Mayor.
I agree.
Okay, next item on the agenda will be consider resolution 2021-0-08, substituting projects authorized by 2020 general obligation funds, bonds, old business.
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of the City Council. As you know, this was an item before you at our last meeting. I will hit the highlights. We do have Tyler with us this evening as well that can address any legal questions you may have. As you know, in 2019, we had a number of projects that we started through the GL bond process, included basically 6 different projects: Riverview Crossroads, Public Works property acquisition, this location here that we refer to as Town Center, 4th Street improvements, preliminary engineering for 98th Street, and street and drainage improvements widely within the community. The biggest project of all, of course, was the Riverview Crossroads project. So in 2020, we issued an additional $2,475,000 in preparation for the bidding for that project. We did estimate that our cost on that project, just for our match for KDOT, was around $1.9 million. As noted in the memo, the total cost came in at about $3.3 million. That includes the construction cost with King Construction of about 2.6 and the city's share of around 664,000. There are a couple of items still outstanding, primarily the relocation of water. And then we always keep some reserve back on these kind of construction projects, because even once the project is done, there's often follow-up items, even years into the future, because it has to go through an audit at the state level and then an audit at the federal highway level. And typically it's 3 years after the project before we know what our true costs are. So we came to you at the last meeting, basically stating that out of that project, we have about $1.25 million. The rest of what we have in that fund today, we're reserving for that water relocations and for just project reserve. So during that meeting, there was some discussion about what if we looked at this to split those dollars up in some manner. There was some questions, concerns about public safety facilities. So sure, we're only talking public safety. There are no discussions of City Hall or other city facilities. And at that point, we went back and come forward with a second recommendation, which would move $650,000 into the 98th Street project and $600,000 into the Town Center project, specifically for police and fire facilities. By doing that, both projects would have sufficient funding for all of their engineering, architecture, right-of-way acquisition. So it would get both projects to the point that they would be ready to construct in the future. Both projects would take additional funding in the future. And so that's, in summary, what it would do if you split $650 into the 98th Street, $600,000 to cover costs related to design and engineering of public safety facilities, as well as the relocation of utilities that'll be required. So again, the dollar amounts cover both of those projects. Happy to answer any questions. You do have 2 separate resolutions for considerations. We've generally referred to them as version 1 and version 2, and happy to answer questions.
A couple of folks on the council had mentioned the possibility of renovating the current fire station instead of a total new build. Would
Correct.
that put us in a box where we couldn't do that, or could we use the funds toward that if we chose to?
Well, I probably have to, from a legal standpoint, I'm going to leave that to Tyler. Well, I think I'll leave that with Tyler because I don't know the answer. So if you're saying if we put funds to the town center, there was additional, we get through the other planning, does it leave enough money to do the design work for converting the fire station into some other public facility? Is that the question? To make sure I understand it. So.
Well, perhaps. I mean,
Okay.
or to work for the fire station or add on to it for fire and police. Could we use that existing footprint to
Yes,
make a building that would be usable?
I believe, I mean, because the purpose is for police and fire.
Right.
Right. We have, as you know, and we spent a fair amount of money in some early architecture. And originally the plan was to take the current fire station, expand it to the south for basically crew quarters, a common access area, and then an internal area. Part of that challenge is it gets into the parking lot right here up to this building. So I mean, there's some space issues to have to work with. And then the second option was you've got open land to the north and put it on open land, transfer your police and fire in there. And then in the future, you leave this space down here to be used, as it currently is being used or for some other purposes.
And I don't know, I'm not saying which one is right or which way I would go. I just didn't know if it put us in a box to where we couldn't do that in the future. And my other question was just, my understanding is that this money couldn't be used for just other street repairs or renovations. It would have to be 98th Street or the public safety, right? We couldn't just use it to fix other streets in the city.
It has to be a capital project that has a project assigned, or you can't just come up with some project or just use it for general paving or things. There would have to be a project, and we don't really have a current project out there that we've moved to that level at this point. I mean, Tyler, you want to touch on that about substitutions, what you can or can't do? Maybe that would be helpful.
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor and Council. To Mike's point previously, I think the idea behind the second version of the resolution that's in your packet is to help identify projects that are ready to go now, that we can apply these funds to now so that they're not sitting around generating interest and we're paying interest to borrow those funds. So it may be that there are other projects that are ready to go, but I don't know that he or staff have identified those. If there were, then we could look at using the funds for those other capital projects. He also mentioned sort of the difference between a capital improvement versus maintenance. You want to do something that's a substantial improvement rather than like filling a pothole here and there with the money that you borrow from these projects.
Again, I would just, I would note that basically it takes both projects and brings them up to kind of the same place. So it won't delay construction of 98th Street because we know that, there'll have to be future. That project won't let until probably late 2023. This gives us the funding to get it through the right-of-way acquisition process. And obviously the other project will be dependent upon planning as would be. So happy to, again, answer questions and move from there. So.
Is it true that this split would in no way hinder the 98th Street project from moving forward at full steam?
It won't, yes, sir, that's correct. It won't have any impact on what we're doing on 98th Street relative to the planning and the engineering and moving it to full design. What'll hinder it more than anything is KDOT's process, but it's a fairly slow process.
What is the projected cost for the 98th Street?
$7 million. Just over $7 million. So
I think it's important to point out that we're talking about 98th Street from Kansas Avenue North.
correct,
We're
yes.
not talking about anything else south of 98th Street, where I would agree that is
that is some of the worst roads that we have in Edwardsville. And that money could be used for south of Camp.
I don't
think
know
it
that
can.
that's correct, but I have to.
If it's a project, if we made it a capital project, for sure too.
Well, I mean, if we wanted to create new projects,
My question would be, what are you gonna gain by doing that?
A road.
No, you're only gaining just a little bit.
I don't know how much, 650,000.
Well, it's not gonna do a heck of a lot. You're looking at three issues here, in my opinion. 98th Street, a deteriorating police station, a substandard fire station, and a city hall that is deteriorating, and you're gonna spend some money on all three of them. Where do you wanna go? I do not agree with these letters about 102nd Street. 102nd Street had its chance, and it was killed.
Okay.
So as far as I'm concerned, they'll just have to wait. But the needs for our staff and our facilities for City Hall and et cetera, to me, reigns well over any of those other issues. That's it.
In the last 3 or 4 years, how much have we invested in this property with the purpose of building new facilities in this area?
just under $1 million. I think it was around 900. We spent 710,000 on acquisition, and 239,000 has been expended from demoing the buildings to architecture, engineering, and some other there was asbestos remediations, those things. But I mean, big cost. So we're at 950,000, give or take.
Monies that were spent with the intent of a new facility at some point in time on that piece of property.
I believe
That was my understanding.
Yeah, and that's my understanding also, that that's the case.
Right.
But when you have people that are driving down 98th Street and knocking holes in their oil pans.
I've been down 98th Street and I've never seen a hole that would knock a hole in an oil. I've been down there several times.
Well,
I'd like to know where that location is.
I'm not
We
asking.
have such a big crater.
I'm not asking. I'm telling you that occurred, and you guys are fully aware that occurred, that an oil pan got a hole punctured in it, almost right in front of the police range, the old police range. And it was brought to our attention then. And that road is still terrible road to drive on. I'm not saying that our police and our fire and that there's not a need for all three things that we're talking about. City Hall. Yes, we spent dollars on getting this bought and purchased, but I am not ready to spend, personally, myself, am not going to vote to spend money on new facilities until our streets are safe for the people that pay the salaries and the taxes of the people in Edwardsville. They can drive on them and be safe.
Is there an estimate what it would take to take 102nd Street? And what was the third street that was mentioned in the public comment?
I don't know that there
Richland, and there was,
oh, Swartz.
okay, so it was 102nd, Swartz, and Richland, and Riverview? The four?
And some of those, so let me not to, so
Let me continue my thought process so you
Yes, sir.
understand what the question is. My question is, what would be the expense, what would be the cost to, actually, there's no repair, I think we're talking rebuild on this. And if it, let's just say a swag of $5 million to do all that. I would propose that we consider a bond to do it all and continue moving forward with the projects we've invested in already as well. And so we can wrap this all up into one thing. And I don't disagree. I drive on those roads. I've had to replace my shock absorbers and struts because of the road. So I'm not unaware of that, but we can keep all the things moving forward at the same time. We don't have to pick and choose on what we're going to do. And if the desire of the taxpayer is to consider all of those things and getting them up to new road standards, let's get a cost and let's propose a bond measure in order to do that, and then present the mill levies that it's going to take for increase to accomplish that kind of a project.
So I'm going to give you, this is a very general rule of thumb, right? So you got drainage, you got everything, but a lot of cities will use about $1 million per lane mile. So if you take, I'm going to use 102nd Street from Kansas Avenue North. It's approximately 1 mile long, so it's 2 lane miles. So just construction, right? Not any acquisitions of rights of way. It's not any engineering. It's none of those things. It's a $2 million project. You probably have $1 million, maybe less, depending on the project. But again, if we take 98th Street, the portion that's fund that we're moving forward, the construction engineering is $450,000. The inspection for that road will be about that again, roughly $400,000 to $500,000 for the construction inspection. So you have not quite $1 million there. We probably will have $500,000 in right-of-way acquisitions. And that road, quite honestly, is one of the easier ones to do right-of-way acquisition, because there's quite a few areas through there where we already have sufficient width because the state highway, purchased some of that. So we have a lot of areas in there where we have properties where we won't need to acquire right-of-way. We may need temporary easement. So I'm just trying to give you, if you did 102nd Street, which I think, as the mayor mentioned, we went and we did full set of plans for that. It was over 100,000. I don't remember the exact price. We didn't do full plans. We did basically what they call field check plans, to the point we could buy right of way. That came forth. There was, people didn't necessarily want to do that at that point, and so that project was stopped, and we didn't move forward with the right of way acquisition. That was preliminary, what we call field check plans. So we kind of use almost like a 30-60-90 planning, right? So field plans might be in the 30%. Your kind of next level 60%. So now you're into structures, and and then you have construction plans, but they're not put out for bid yet, right? So all the plans are together, but not all the extra stuff that you have to put out for bid is kind of in that 90%. So I would also note that just because we're not doing a bonded project doesn't mean we're not doing projects. So paving and overlay, and I think as Dustin, what he said is, we know we have these places we need to do full depth patches on. That one by the range was that, right? There's several other places that we've done it. So full depth patching is a little more expensive than just paving, because you got to dig it out and rebuild it. But I mean, those roads may have good fundamental base. So if we're just trying to improve the rideability to them, right? So we're not trying to improve sight, width, safety. Having a smooth road improves safety. But I mean, we're not you can't add width and drainage and all that unless you kind of reconstruct it. Now you're into, I think, what was it, about 300,000 a mile, give or take, for a paving overlay, right? That doesn't include, going in. And we have some roads that won't take much in the sense of putting in full depth. And we have other roads where probably full depth doesn't make sense, because there's so much of it in a location that it doesn't make sense. So
Well,
I think, sorry. No, I was just gonna say, so one, I don't think eliminates the other necessarily. And some of the money we have for streets and drainage. So for example, what we did on Riverview, where we had to replace the failed pipe and overlay it, or, other projects that we're doing on a capital route, right? So not every road can have capital dollars either. So I don't know that one means you don't do the other. I think somewhat is that, you do both, but to reconstruct every road in town simultaneously would be difficult, just by travel, if nothing else. So Dusty may have another
I
comment.
want to mention, in the street plan, if you remember, that was, I don't remember when that was, but I mean, 102nd Street is very much in the crosshairs. Those east-west routes are as well. I've been here 13 months now, so I mean, I beg you that we get a little bit of time. I know time is always a crunch, but I really think that we could do some nice things for a reasonable amount of cost, at least get some projects out there, but we're close. And I keep saying that, but I think that we can move forward with some of these streets and make some people happy. It's just a matter of, well, staff, and I'm out there a lot helping the guys too and gals, and just putting those things together. So I hope with that road plan that you could review that again, I guess, and kind of see what we're looking at. And then like 102nd Street, 98 South, 102nd's been kind of in the crosshairs, but I think those things, as I get a little bit closer, I'll be able to give you some more ideas, or give Michael some more ideas on costs and things like that. So I apologize for the moment, but
Dusty, could you remind us when some of the streets, 102nd Street, Richland Swartz, and the south half of 98th Street will be addressed on the plan?
so my goal with the plan, we've really been looking hard at West Kansas Avenue, South 110th Street. Those are two streets that I believe are manageable. The complaint on South 110th Street, there's literally one pothole on that street. So, I mean, it's a bad pothole. That's the one that we were talking to BPU about. I did find out, they said it's not a water leak. I think we're still gonna have to dig it up and expose that to make sure it's not, before we go putting something over the top of it and it goes bad again. But so those two are kind of big points. One reason is I think we can do some limited patching and get something on top of them and make them nice quickly. And then 102nd Street, Michael's been pushing me on that one, but this fall, I'm hoping, without making, at least that we get their full depth patching done. If we can get some full depth patching in there, the rideability will improve drastically. And then beyond that, there's maybe some overlay talk that could cost efficiently really make that stretch pretty reasonable. Again, the drainage, some of the width issues, those are gonna remain there until you have a substantial capital project. But I think there are some things we can do to improve the rideability and the safety without that.
I think that it's really unfair to say to the people that are on 102nd Street, you had your chance, too bad. You got to wait. That's not right. Those people all voted. They voted for us that are setting up here. And because they didn't like the plan that was presented, I was at the meeting at the community center when people said, we don't like the current plan that's being presented. And that's to take our front yards and to put curbs and to put sidewalks. They rejected that plan. Now, I think that if you go to those same people today and say, would you like for your road to be milled and overlaid? You'll get 100% of the people to say yes.
I've never told anybody too bad, no matter where I'm
No,
at.
it was just said about
I did.
10 minutes ago.
Okay.
But I've not, and I think we're
I
gonna
admit
move
it,
forward with
it's
it
okay.
well. And I think I really do think that we have some good things coming up the pipeline.
Well, that's
I just-
fine. But these people rejected a plan 3 years ago, 2 years ago, that continued Kansas Avenue up 102nd Street, that same design. They didn't like that. They didn't need it. They don't want it. And that's fine. That's their right. But they also deserve a road that they can travel on and not to be told, too bad, you got to wait. You had your chance. So I don't change my mind one bit.
I won't either. Too bad.
Thank you.
When would construction start on 98th Street?
Probably fall of 2023, early 24.
Okay, so
I
we're,
mean, that's because it's a federally funded project. It's what they call a fiscal year 24 project, right? That's how it's scheduled. So that begins October 1, or I can't remember, September, October of 2023 through September of 2024. Our plans have been, and we've got in early, is to get all of our planning right of way, all of those things completed as early as possible. There is an option, and it's, I won't say it's outside of our control, but there's the option potentially, if we're far enough in that process and KDOT approves everything, right? So we're still on a KDOT schedule. It's a KDOT project. But if you get a project far enough along, the city could go issue debt for the full project and be reimbursed by the KDOT funds. It's really a timing issue, and I can't, so I can't tell you that's an absolute. I will tell you we're farther along than most projects, partially because we did the full 98th Street study, right? And we have that preliminary, and we'll be bringing that back. But, we have that we got started on the engineering before we even knew we had a project. Because again, in 2019, we didn't know we were going to have funding for that street. What we said was we're going to issue debt to do preliminary design and potentially right-of-way acquisition. And I'm not trying to beat up the 102nd Street project, but similar to what our plan was there, right, was to put a set of plans together and then move forward with right-of-way acquisition. So then it would be prepared for future expansion improvements to whatever, right? That was the concept of what we did for 98th Street. We got very fortunate. We got funded to move that, but by being a little ahead of the schedule, that's good. And that's what we're trying to do on our other roads, to say, what is our standards between a maintenance, right? I consider an overlay, mill overlays, things like that is predominantly a maintenance project, right? It's needed. I mean, you're not going to build your way out of, probably 10, 15 linear miles of old county roads, right, that we have, and bring them into any reasonable standard in a short period of time. But the more we can do in prepping those roads, putting overlays on them, doing the seal coats like we're doing, it extends the life, gives that rideability till we can support full construction, reconstruction, get rid of the hills, get rid of the safety issues, things like that. The one other thing, and it's a side note, but important, and Tyler can discuss this. When we go out and we issue bonds, we issue them for projects, right? So the city council, you do a project authorization when you issue bonds, and you say, we're going to spend these monies for these projects. And you adopt a resolution, becomes part of the overall bond package. We issue the bonds. The bondholders assume that that's what you're going to use the money for, right? Which is why we have to go through this process when we substitute from one project to another. The other part, and I'll let Tyler, is a thing called arbitrage, which has a lot to do with the money and the investments and potential taxation of those dollars, or even conversion of bonds from tax exempt to taxable bonds. So you know that better than me, I believe. So let Tyler hit that, because it is an important aspect.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to keep in mind, just the timing aspect of when you borrow the funds and how quickly those proceeds get spent on capital
We
projects.
need to turn his mic up.
Is that a little better?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So the question is, what's the timing between when you borrow the funds and when you spend those funds on capital improvements? And in order to borrow money on a tax exempt basis, which we almost always do because these are public projects, for the most part, they're funded by tax dollars. You can borrow on a tax exempt basis, but you have to jump through certain hoops to do that. And one of those things is avoiding arbitrage, which is basically sitting on the money longer than you need to and earning interest on it. So part of the reason that I think there's some urgency here that we're trying to impart to identifying projects that are ready to be funded now is so we can stay within those arbitrage requirements to get the money spent that we borrowed recently.
Since we've already done preliminary on 102nd Street, if we were to want to do not just an overlay, but a real construction, like new construction project on that, would that be about a half a mile worth of construction and funding that we're talking about on 102nd or south on 98th?
So you're saying it's 600,000 equates to a half a mile? Well, it's about a quarter of a mile, because when I say I'm talking lane miles, so one lane north, one lane south. So you're talking 1,500 feet You might get 2,000 for a reason. And sometimes part of the problems, I'm sorry, let me speak. Part of the problems is, right, you have to tie the roads in, right? I mean, so sometimes it's a fill, it's a cut, it's a drainage. So sometimes you may have to start or stop it, you know, depending on what the topography is and what the future plans are. You know, just like even, I'll take 98th Street. So when we did Kansas Avenue, right, we improved the road going down because we needed to make sure we had the curb returns to get the water down to the water crossing down there. When we rebuild 98th Street, we're going to cut some of that out because that's going to get filled and the hill at the top gets cut. But at that time, we had to have a place to tie the road in. So, you know, you're always going to have some of that. I mean, you don't want to be a mile or half, you know, I mean, you might have a few hundred feet, just like on Edwardsville Drive, right, where we tapered the curbs down. I mean, in the future, you'll put curbs going up that road to catch your drainage. And you know, we'll cut out a little bit of that because, as you know, there's a little bit of a hump there. Well, it was trying to make grades match. So I don't know that from a construction process for a capital program that $600,000 is going to help, because again, even if I go farther south, now I still have to go get engineering and design and potentially, you know, I mean, without knowing the project. So you might spend a third of it just in engineering and then you don't even have that. So I think tying them to projects is important. And again, what we tried to do here, you know, with the second option is say, this gets both projects to a definable point. You have the design, you'll know what your costs are, you know, you're ready to move to the next step. Those are different projects, but that was the, I think what we heard, you know, what would happen if you did this. It gets both of these projects to their point of being able to move forward to construction. And if we can move 98th Street to earlier construction, and we can make that work with KDOT, and we want to go we do temporary notes, that's always an option. And again, a temporary note's like a construction loan, right? You borrow it once the project's done, you convert it into permanent financing. In this case, a portion of it would be paid back from the federal funds, and the portion not paid back by federal funds would be our cost share that we would have had anyways. Again, Mayor, I don't really have anything to add, but we're happy to answer questions.
The immediate needs we're talking about for 102nd and Richland and practically every street in Edwardsville are immediate needs. These things that we're talking about here are long-term needs. And so really the immediate needs need to be discussed in the budget process. Those are things we need to include at the present time to get them done now. I don't think anybody wants to see these holes that are out there waiting for 3 years to have this money applied to them. And so I think really they're two totally different issues. I think those holes will be pretty deep if we waited till you know, this type of a time frame for construction. But we have the opportunity to move everything forward. And we're not making a commitment to a building. We're making a commitment to be able to do something appropriately without delaying it another cycle of having to do all this work in the future. And so I'm very much in favor of moving everything forward. I'm very much in favor of looking at our budget and putting a lot more than we've ever done before in road repairs. I think we as a council got to suck it up. We've got to be willing to go to a discussion to meet the needs of the community at the present time and look into the future as well. We've got that opportunity. And so with that, I'm going to be bold enough to make a motion that we approve resolution 2021-08 version 2.
Second.
This is the one with the split funds, correct, Mike?
Yes, yes, sir.
Option 2.
There has been a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2021-08 with option 2. Before I ask the clerk to call roll, are there any more comments or questions? If not, would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
No.
Stites.
Absolutely.
Motion does carry. Next item on the agenda will be to conduct a public hearing regarding property at 9711 Steel Road and record its determination of the matter through resolution 2021-09.
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of the council. As you recall, we came to the council at your May 10th meeting and adopted Resolution 2021-05 regarding the property at 9711 Steel Road. And its determination as an unsafe, unfit structure for human habitation. I believe we noted a number of safety concerns. If you've been by the property, I think you're aware of them, everything from broke windows to openings in the roof, dangers around the property. There's been high grass and weeds on numerous occasions. We've made numerous attempts to contact and work with property owners who are in California. I think the actual property owner is deceased, but it's in a trust or trustee. So I know there are back taxes on it. It was scheduled, and I'm not sure the outcome. I believe it was on the June. Tax sale, and I'm trying to get information on that. I was told it had been moved to October, but I don't see it in October. So we will follow up on that. What tonight is we're required to hold a public hearing, so you'll need to open the public hearing. If there are any public comments as to why this property should not be declared an unsafe, unfit structure for human habitation, then those persons can come forward and tell you why it isn't. And or if the property owner or representatives present tell you how they intend to correct it. After the public hearing is closed, if there's any other comments, staff will be happy to answer your questions. After that, if you approve the resolution, it does give the property owner 30 days to correct that. If for some reason they make good attempt and haven't accomplished it by that time and you wish to extend it, you always have that right to extend it. And we've had that in the past where somebody was making, good faith efforts to get something done. But otherwise, at that point, it would be, they would basically, the city could go in if it chose to and move forward with demolitions and filing a lien on the property. I would note by the filing of a lien, it does not give us ownership to that property. And so we always look to see how this process, along with the tax sales process, work together. Wyandotte County has worked with us in the past to ensure timing is right. So if it's going to come up on a tax sale, say in October, we may not want to immediately move to demolish the building, but we have the process set in place. Or we choose to do that, and understanding that if it goes to tax foreclosure and somebody buys it, then our lien would be waived during the tax sale. With that, Mayor, I would recommend you open the public hearing and take any comments.
Do we need a motion to open a public hearing? I believe we do.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to open a public hearing concerning the property at 9711 Steel Road and record its determination of the matter through resolution 2021-09.
Second.
It has been moved in second to open the public hearing regarding property at 9711 Steel Road. Would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stites.
Yes.
Okay. I don't see anybody in the audience, but this is an opportunity for the council to ask any questions or make any comments.
I would probably recommend take the public hearing, close it, and then count.
Okay. All right.
Make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stites.
Yes.
Okay, now is the opportunity for council to make any questions or comments.
What is the estimated tax that's owed?
I think it's around $10,000 at this point.
Is there any property on there that is salvageable? If it came to us being able to sell it?
I don't believe that any part of the house is salvageable. I mean, I don't,
There's a clause in there that we could sell something if the city,
yes, if there was some assets that were in the building that we wanted to sell, or if somebody came along and said, hey, we want to take all the lumber out of it, as an example, I've had that in the past where somebody goes, I'll tear it down if I can have all the lumber. Well, it's got a value and we have to at least apply it back. Now that value may be very minimal. Sometimes you may have something where you literally sell it. So we take all the lumber out and we put it up for bid and we get a bid for $1,000. Then we would have to pay that to the taxing district and get reimbursed. That, I won't say that never happens, but it's pretty rare that happens in this case.
what is the estimated cost that the city would have to demolish this?
10 to 15,000. I would note, just because I was looking at the delinquent tax roll. So the property that is adjacent to this and faces onto 98th Street, I believe it's 2109, or so it's the rock house that faces onto 98th Street. That too is set for the tax sale. I think it has 20 years of back taxes on it, if I'm not mistaken. So that
Well,
too is
taxes are
property.
high.
Yeah. So again, I will say, what our plan would be, if timing works, would be if it goes to the tax sale, and the land bank's changed a little bit, but so the land bank would say, we'll take it into the land bank. And then what we did on 5th Street, and we'd like to do similar to this, is they can transfer that to the city, and then the city does a contract for deed. So we say, we'll sell you this piece, we put it out for bid, it's a sealed process, we're going to give you a contract for deed. If you agree to do the following items, then, you bid $100 or 500 or whatever the bid is. If you do all these things, either bring the house back up so it's a livable condition, meets the code, or you demo it and make the lot ready for resale, then if you meet the terms of the contract deed, we will then give you title to the property. Or the city can choose to hold the property if that's what it decides, because it's trying to put other pieces together. So that's a little different than it just going to the land bank and sitting in the land bank for years and years and years and years. I mean, we have a number of properties that we weren't part of the process. So that is the plan. I can't tell you that absolutely will work that way, but again, if we go and demo the property and it goes to a tax sale 30 days later and it gets bought at the tax sale, because now, right, it's a nice piece of property because we cleaned it all up, and they buy it at the tax sale, then any liens on that property, any tax liens are waived. Now, federal liens and the federal government never waives their liens, and I think medical liens are not waived, but all other liens basically.
The taxes are waived?
They are, yeah, once it goes to land bank,
Oh,
all
to the land
tax,
bank. Gotcha.
all tax liens go away.
And we can't
At the
stop
time you,
that?
yeah, so on the bid, if you go to the auction, you have to bid minimum what the taxes are due
Right.
on the property.
Right.
If nobody bids that,
Gotcha.
they can either set it aside and bid it at a later date, or they can take that property into the land bank. At the point they take it into the land bank, effectively all tax liens, so all back taxes due all the taxing entities.
People have
go
caught
away.
on to that.
Yes, and I will say that the UG has done a good job on properties that are can be rehabilitated.
Right.
And they've done a really good job of getting those into private hands and to nonprofits to put them back into housing, and get them back on the tax roll. I think their intent originally was to get all that back into the private sector housing and be owner occupied. But I think they realized that the rental market, they had to open it up to allow people to refurbish it, flip it, so to speak, and turn it into rental property, or they were going to set on a lot of empty houses otherwise. So they do take housing into the inventory, where before they only took vacant property.
if they have it in the land bank, they're responsible for maintenance of the property, keep it to code. Is that accurate or? inaccurate?
That is accurate. I will tell you that's a challenge sometimes, but yes, they are to maintain the property, mow it, et cetera. And they do, but probably maybe, I mean, they'll mow it to the level it meets the code, but maybe not at the level we would like to see it done.
So if it was transferred to us, then we would be responsible to keep it.
That's
We would
correct.
be able to keep it nicer than it may be kept
Correct.
otherwise.
We would put it in our mowing schedule to maintain it. Our intent, right, the real intent is to get the property, I mean, if there's a public purpose for it, I just say it's a park, it's land next to a park or something, you want to expand a park or have a park or neighborhood park, that's great. We can, convert it to a park, make it a public property and use it. If we're not going to do that, the goal is to get it back into private hands, so it goes back on the tax roll. It's generating taxes for all the taxing entities, right? And becomes a productive piece of property. That's the ultimate goal.
And just to confirm, the homeowners insurance company, we haven't had any progress with them.
So we have to, before this public hearing, we have to do an owner's encumbrance report of all lien holders, owners. We even have to send a letter to the property because there could be a tenant there, right? I mean, even somebody that's just there. So we have to do all that. And I don't know, did they all come back? Or most of them came back. I don't know if, I don't think there's a bank lien on the property or anything like that.
Correct. So I couldn't say for sure if they were all, because they all have to be sent certified mail. We did get a number of those back, returned to sender, especially the one that we sent to the physical property on there. What we've not, even if we've not gotten a return to sender notice, we've not had any return outreach from any of the stakeholders that were identified in the O&E report.
So again, I just summarize from our standpoint, we think that it is, now that we've had this public hearing, is to pass this resolution, give that property owner 30 days. Again, we must publish this resolution. We also have to send, I believe, this resolution by certified mail to the known property owner, which is what, right? The property owner is what's based in the tax rolls. That, even if we know somebody else is living there, we've had that in the past, we have to notify the property owner per the tax rolls. And any lien holders, which we've already done. Basically, there are none. So,
Is there consideration on the process for the adjacent property that you mentioned earlier? That stone house?
In the sense of doing the same process for
Right.
that? Yes, I think I didn't realize they were going to the tax, taking it to the next tax sale till today.
So when is the next tax?
October. I don't remember the date, but it's in October.
Okay, if there are no further comments, what action do you want us to take?
It would be to consider the resolution
Okay,
2021-09.
resolution 2021-09, okay.
And the effect of this is that it notifies the land or the owner that we are taking these actions and puts us with the ability to demolish the property and clean the property up.
You are declaring that it's an unsafe, unfit structure for human habitation, and that you're giving them notice to correct. And if they fail to correct it, the city at any time after that point can move forward with taking whatever corrective actions and file a lien against their property.
Make a motion that we adopt resolution 2021-09, resolution of the city of Edwardsville, Kansas, determining if one or more structures at 9711 Steel Road are dangerous, unsafe, or unfit for human use or habitation.
Second.
It has been moved and second to adopt resolution 2021-09, and I will not repeat all the rest of that, but we'll leave it at that. If there are no further questions, would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Kahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stites.
Yes. Okay, next item on the agenda will be consider authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for pave and striping in conjunction with 2021 surface seal project.
Hello. The recommendation is for city council, to consider the city manager enter to the contract for the striping on the seal project. This project will be funded through the special sales tax fund. There's kind of some numbers there in the background just that speak about the cost of previous striping projects and then the cost estimate on this one. We've been working to locate bidders for the striping seal project, for striping the seal project down there on Wood End and 4th Street, Newton Streets, River Falls. And we're having trouble locating contractors, so we're still working on that, but we may be within a week or two of getting a seal on. So we want to be ready to roll when that happens. The cost estimate is about $35,000 for all that striping. That includes 39 arrows and many other things down there because all the turn lanes and things. We're kind of working to reduce that cost if we can, based on engineering recommendations. But that estimate is around 35,000. Due to the time sensitive nature of the seal project, we want to be ready to roll when that gets here. Staff's recommending that city council authorize the city manager to award a striping contract not to exceed 35,000 to the best bidder to complete this work. Kind of preliminary to that process, just so we're ready.
So you want us to approve something that we don't have a bid on yet?
There's few bidders. So far, several of these striping companies have gone out of business, merged together, and it appears there's only 2 at this point. So we're getting written bids from those bidders. What's happened is that the seal coat's going to happen, and we don't want to leave it unstriped, especially Wood End Road. The striping will be basically the same as what's there now, though we may exclude some of in the center lanes, there's those left arrows. They put a whole lot of them in there. And even the engineer says, well, so we know we have to restripe that road, and we believe we can do that road and the crosswalks. We want to do, make sure our crosswalks, trail crosses, are ready to go. And I believe the one on 4th Street is included.
Yeah, the crosswalk, yeah, and 9th, the one right around 9th Street.
Where did that estimate come from, the 35?
It's based on those numbers from 2018 and then some research that I've done, just
Oh.
contacting the few sources that we have, I guess, but.
We've got some line item quotes. And so we know that, for example, the arrows, if they use a thermal, so I could put down and heat up, $250. So this will be a unit pricing, so we need 10 arrows and the 250 each, and we know $2,500. So what we're doing is we're trying to make sure we can follow up with the striping right of ways, especially again on Wood End Road being a 3-lane road that we have. We have some roads we probably don't need to put striping on those. And we may look at 2-lane road, you need to double line. Generally speaking, you don't. Because, you know, we have the newer roads that we paved, we haven't done that. In the past, we've done Edwardsville Drive, mainly because how narrow it is the main reason we've done that. Typically a 2-lane residential street, unless it's a major collector or arterial, standard says 6,000 vehicles a day or more. You typically don't stripe it. Wood End Road would be all those. That plan, we're saying is a maximum.
So this would include the neighborhood streets that we're resurfacing as well? Right
Which there's
now.
not, just the crosswalks, all there's striping on those really, so.
So the 35,000 doesn't include stripes down the middle of that, just the
We
crosswalk.
wouldn't stripe. We don't stripe,
Right.
2-lane residential streets would not be striped. Lake Street doesn't need to be striped. Do that. Because they're not high volume streets. 300 or 400 vehicles a day doesn't generally justify striping. Again, something like Lydia Road, you have left turn lanes, things like that. You know, if you look at Kansas Avenue, we had to stripe coming over the bridge to Kansas Avenue because you have narrowing of the pavement, you have turn lanes, instead of those stripe, but you don't put center stripe down Curve Road. Because it hasn't been bought.
So what does this include besides Wood End Road?
Just the crosswalk on 4th, 9th, and then right around the corner on 9th, and then the crosswalk also on Wooden. I think
Okay.
a big reason for doing it the way we did it here is because it came in a little higher than we thought when we quoted it. We didn't really think we'd be in this ballpark, but the special symbols alone are around $10,000. Again, we're going to try to reduce that cost if we can, knock some of those out of there that aren't maybe needed based on code or standards. But that's kind of where we ended up, that we were going to be in a little bit lower. And then it came out to that. Well, then we got the seal project rolling and we're kind of ready to try to be prepared to stripe that immediately when we're done.
We hope to have the seal coat done. Striping for the next time.
That's not a promise,
Yeah,
but,
it's not a problem, but I mean, they're looking.
but we
at-
hope so.
they're looking at potential striping start. If they can get that done, we just don't want to then be 3 or 4 weeks after striping. And you can put temporary striping down and, I mean, you've seen that on highways, right? They put the tape down, put temporary striping, and it never stays. We'd rather just get straight. I know this is a little bit out of norm in the sense normally we would have gone out without bid. And in the future, we may build it into the seal coat contract people. But again, there's really, it appears 2 companies that do this as independent companies. Some of your paving companies, Superior Bowen's a great big company. They have their own striping equipment, but they're a big paving company, so right, highways and stuff. Instead of subbing it out to Craft Tech, we can go straight to Craft Tech and not have our seal coat people just go to Craft Tech. We can get a little better pricing. Who's going to be?
And just if you're concerned about the dollar amount, if you look at the 2018 project, we had approximately 16,500 foot of the 4-inch striping, which is your normal striping, and then only 4 of the arrows. And it was around $10,000, and that was 3 years ago. So just kind of a reference of where we're at price wise. I think that's pretty good estimate, fair compared to at least that last project that was done.
And you're saying there was more competition for the last project than there would be for this one. And what are our liabilities if we didn't do it?
I think you certainly want to do it. Certainly, best practices are that
Engineering standards.
Yeah.
Say absolutely strike.
Okay, well, and I guess that's kind of where that's what I'm fishing for is that it's really kind of a service to all the commercial customers down there, reducing their liabilities and so forth. So they know when they're on the right side of the road and when they're on the wrong side of the road. And it's for our city liability.
Follow standards.
The price is crazy ridiculous, I think, but I also understand the challenges and based on the history of managing our money very well, I make a motion, we authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement to stripe the streets for up to $35,000, God forbid.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract for pavement striping in conjunction with the 2021 surface seal project, not to exceed $35,000. Would the clerk please call roll?
I have a question.
Oh,
Hopefully
excuse me, go ahead.
the striper doesn't listen to our meetings. And
knows that he has a cap of $35,000 that he needs to stay under. So
It is a unit price. We have at least one of their unit price. If they try to come in overpriced, find another.
Anything, any more comments? If not, would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Kahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stites.
no.
Next item on the agenda will be a presentation by staff regarding the mill levy implications of the revenue neutral rate, RNR, and take any necessary actions.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This is kind of our latest, not so much a budget workshop as it relates to the development of the 2022 budget. We're really focusing on this new budget process that the state has pushed through that kind of presents a new wrinkle in our budget development timeline and some of the processes that we as staff need to do in order to keep on the same timeline, notify the county at certain dates of certain actions if this body wants to go in one direction or another. So really just for your benefit, for the public's benefit, just explain what the revenue neutral rate is and how it's going to affect this budget process and what the staff recommendations are going to be at this point. So real quickly, what is the revenue neutral rate? So Senate Bill 13 and House Bill 2104 established this new process for setting the city's mill levy. And what it does is essentially expresses the revenue neutral rate, which I'll shorten to R&R, which is the tax rate in mills that would generate the same amount of property tax revenue in dollars as levied in the previous year using the new valuation. So valuations go up and down each year. They take that valuation, they see how much property tax revenue was included in your budget last year, and they kind of work backwards and get that revenue neutral rate or the R&R expressed as a mill levy. This process replaces the tax lid. So the tax lid was mostly targeted on actual dollars. Here's the lid of money that you cannot exceed without entering into step XYZ. What the R&R does is more of a focus on the actual mill levy, that tax rate. So the tax lid's no longer a concern for municipalities in the budget setting process, but now we've got this R&R situation that we and all Kansas communities are working through. So that leads to the question, who calculates the R&R? The Wyandotte County Clerk develops the R&R and provides notification to the city. At the same time, it notifies us of our valuation. So we got our valuation information, which we'll go over later in this presentation, about 5 minutes before our last meeting 2 weeks ago. And at the same time, they gave us what their proposed revenue neutral rate would be for the fiscal year 2022 budget. So valuations are determined by the county appraiser. The city doesn't have any role in the property appraisal process, setting values, anything like that. So essentially what the state has done, the state meaning the state legislature, has created a process that is irrespective of individual communities and the different funding mechanisms and revenue streams and economic development incentives that they may have in place, created a blanket process for all of these Kansas communities to follow, and have tasked the county with putting together how that system is administered, which is effectively dictating the decision-making process of the cities. So, I mean, if my disdain for this process is coming through in this presentation, I'll try and do a little bit better job. But for as much as we like to talk about local control and how that's a point of pride for Kansas communities, this is really anything but, at least in my opinion. The state's crafted this process. It's left it up to the counties to administer and making the cities kind of dance within those boundaries. So for the information that we got from the county appraiser's office with our new valuation and our R&R rate, it kind of is as follows, and I'll walk you through it. So that center table, that $75.6 million was our final valuation, which was provided to us by the county in October of last year. We get a preliminary valuation in June for the budget process. This year, that number was $82.9 million. That's the preliminary valuation. It goes up and down by the time the final valuation comes, but that's where it sits right now. So based on that, that's a 9.6% increase in valuation. So if you kind of plug that into the process of how we get to what's that mean as far as property tax dollars, that's at $3.282 million in your top right corner. So that's the R&R property tax revenue based on the information that the county gave us, with an R&R mill levy of 39.579146. So a reduction, an automatic reduction of 3.7 mils. That's where we're at right now. If we took no other action and just accepted what the county had told us what our R&R is, based on the state process, we're looking at an automatic reduction of 3.7 mils, and what the state and the county have determined is our revenue neutral rate, and we'll go into some of the issues with that as we go on. So talking about that R&R property tax revenue. So I've reached out to the county, hoping to get a little bit more clarity on how exactly that R&R rate is developed. Originally, I thought, well, they must use the final valuation information that they give us in October, which includes the final valuation and our final mill levy. When you kind of plug in those calculations, that would mean that our R&R property tax revenue is 3.76, not 3.82. So at best, we're $6,000 off in that scheme, which isn't, it's not that big of a swing, but I would still like a little bit more clarity on how exactly that formula is put together. So I've got a little more confidence in the process as we're applying it to our budget. Now, at worst, we're looking at it closer to a $250,000 swing. And the reason I say that is the R&R process, as the state has developed it, really has a lot of holes in it that don't account for Edwardsville's funding streams specifically. And we'll get into a little bit of that more later. But when I say $250,000 swing, that includes our audited property tax and delinquent tax revenue, as well as our pilot payments, which are a form of property tax, just not counted under that property tax revenue line item. Once you add all those up, again, the audited figures that we got, so real actual figures, not estimates based on what the county has put together, it's not a revenue neutral rate and not a revenue neutral line or amount. It's actually a net negative of $250,000. Again, that's the problem with this blanket process applied to all Kansas communities that doesn't really take into account what actual cities have in place as far as how their budgets are pushed through. So the local issues with the R&R, to summarize, and these are ones that we're not unique in how we're trying to negotiate through this process. So the calculations use data which make incorrect assumptions on our revenue and how that's calculated. And again, it's at worst imprecise and at best imprecise, at worst just really miscalculated. It doesn't have any considerations for the changes in the consumer price index, so costs and services costing more as years go on versus looking backwards. The CPI change from last year to this year as it affects this budget would be 1.9%. Another issue I have with the process is that right now as it stands, so we'll get into the process of what exactly it would take for us to exceed that R&R, which includes some notification and some mailing. Right now, the county clerk's office, and up until 2024, this is how the process will work. They will be the entity alerting the taxpayer that the city of Edwardsville or the city of Bonner Springs or the school districts or whatever want to exceed their R&R, and they are the ones who are paying for the notification and the mailing process, and they are reimbursed by the state, and they will continue to be reimbursed by the state until 2024. At that point, the cost is passed back on to the taxing entity that is going to be exceeding the R&R. So what we have again is essentially a state mandate that would be unfunded should this body decide to exceed the revenue neutral rate. The cost for the notification and the mailing would be split proportionally among those taxing subdivisions required to send the notice. We wouldn't get reimbursed for that cost, so we're kind of losing out on that reimbursement period that the state will be reimbursing the county. And in 2024, if this process is still in place, we'll be out that money as far as notification purposes to all the taxpayers in Edwardsville if we were to make changes to that R&R. And then probably most considerably as it affects us locally is it doesn't have any consideration, the R&R process doesn't have any considerations for existing industrial revenue bonds and how they could affect the tax rolls and the valuations whenever they come back onto the tax roll. So a higher valuation, so when a multi-million-dollar property becomes back on the tax roll, it's going to raise your valuation, even though it's already existed in the city. That's going to artificially lower your mill levy, your R&R rate, to get that same amount that was gained last year. So we're essentially penalized for the economic development that has led to the creation of the industrial park. Now, this group has been through the IRB process, on more than one occasion. It's an economic development tool that we've used to build up the industrial park. But for the sake of folks listening and for people who are going to be watching later, in a nutshell, what IRBs do are they're bonds issued by the local government on behalf of a private company for a specific project. So they raise the capital to fund development of manufacturing or distribution facilities that are going to stay in the community for the long term, come back onto the tax roll, and be of benefit from a revenue and property tax perspective for that city moving forward. During that time where they've got a tax abatement associated with the IRB, those companies pay what we call a payment in lieu of taxes, so a pilot payment. Those pilot payments are not captured under property tax revenue from the state worksheet or the county perspective. So those pilot payments that we have coming from our IRB companies, they're not counted into that revenue neutral rate. So again, it's not, in our case specifically, it's not revenue neutral. It's a net negative from where we were last year. So we've used IRBs considerably in the industrial park for ERP, for Fastenal, for Herff Jones. ERP's going to be coming off the tax rolls. That's going to affect our 2022 budget. Between 2023 and 2027, 2022 and 2027, we will have 7 properties coming off of IRBs onto the tax roll. So that's ERP, Glaziers, Expedex, that's Herff Jones, that's INX, and then the Wood and Industrial 1 and 2 projects. Last time we ran the numbers, and we could probably do this again at a future budget hearing, but that property tax base in the industrial park pays about 60% of the property tax burden in Edwardsville. So that's the reason you do IRBs, because it shifts the property tax burden from your homeowner residents to these large multi-million-dollar companies. So when their abatement ends, they're the ones who are paying property taxes that make up the bulk of the property tax revenue in the city. That's the whole reason you do IRBs. This new state process, it disincentivizes that effort. So it is, it's giving us these extra hoops to jump through in order to gain the economic windfall that previous bodies had kind of lined up for us when these IRBs were approved, 10, 15 years ago. Again, properties under IRBs are not included in the valuation data. So when they come back onto the tax roll, what they're counted as is property with changed use. That's not looking in the rears. That's just looking in the future. So it's now capturing. So in ERPs, we'll talk about ERP. When ERP came back on the tax roll, their assessed valuation is showing up on the valuation worksheet that the county gives us as property changed in use. And right now that amount is about $2.5 million. So typically this amount will match the assessed valuation for the properties that are coming on the tax roll. In this case, it's a little bit different. The assessed valuation for the companies that we're talking about is a little bit closer to 3.2 million. The reason it's different this time is because it's likely, and we're doing a little bit more research into it, but it's likely the net negative effect of the Hard Rock location going from commercial to vacant. So when that goes from commercial to vacant, it's going to lower that assessed valuation, which is probably why we have a difference of about $1 million in the properties change in use, and then the assessed valuation of the company coming back onto the tax roll. But for simplicity's sake, we'll just count that 2.5 million as properties change in use. Let's assume that it's just an IRB coming back onto the tax roll. That's the simplest way to look at it. So if we assume that property changed in use, that $2.5 million is an IRB, and the bulk of it is an IRB coming back on the tax roll, then a more proper calculation on the revenue neutral rate would be to back that out of your final valuation. So when we do that, rather than a 9.6% increase, we're looking at a 6.3% increase in valuation. In this instance, the valuation has gone down because, again, that property that's changed in use is no longer counted in your valuation because it was not there last year. It was under abatement last year. So if you're going to be truly neutral, it needs to be backed out. As it affects the R&R, if under that new valuation, the revenue neutral rate in mills would be 40.79, so 1.2 mills higher than what the current R&R is, still 2.5 mills lower than our current mill levy. So let's bear this out a little bit more. In this instance, the valuation has gone down because of that property change in use adjustment that we just talked about. That revenue in the top right-hand corner, that went up because what I'm now doing is accounting for the $68,000 pilot payment that ERP pays into the city's general fund. Now counting that as if that were to be counted properly as a revenue, as a property tax revenue, it would bump our property tax revenue up by that amount and essentially change all the dominoes in the R&R calculation. Under this scenario, the R&R would go up 2.1 mills from what the county originally said, still resulting in a net reduction of 1.7 mills from the tax from last year. And just for kicks, let's do this one more time and let's apply a 1.9% CPI adjustment. In that case, the R&R, the mill levy to get a true revenue neutral would be 42.43, which is almost 3 mills higher than their current R&R and about 1 mill lower than what our current mill levy is. So this body and our staff, as evidenced by the last 5 years of adopted budgets, has lowered the property tax burden, sometimes more substantially and other times, but regardless, we have been the only taxing entity across Wyandotte County to offer this kind of consistent property tax relief to residents and businesses during that amount of time. And if I had more time, I would like to do a larger kind of statewide just research to see who else out there has done mill levy drops every year for the last 5 years. So essentially what we've got is within the last 5 years, a drop of 4 mills, averaging out about a mill a year. So we fully intend on bringing you a budget that continues this trend. Now, what we are asking is that we, and I say we, this body allows itself the opportunity to set its own mill levy, not have the county set our mill levy. Because as the process is set right now, if the governing body decides to do nothing and say, we want to stick with the revenue neutral rate as it's presented, despite all the holes that we're familiar with now with the application process, then Wyandotte County has set our mill levy. Wyandotte County has used a state process, a blanket state process that is not taken into consideration our unique situations, and Wyandotte County has set the city of Edwardsville mill levy for our 2022 budget. If the governing body decides that it wants to have the discussion to exceed the R&R, then we need to notify the clerk no later than July 20th. So that means that July 12th, so our next city council meeting, is the last meeting to make that action. And what that action would do or would require is a draft of a resolution that proposes essentially a max mill levy, similar to when we publish a maximum budget. We can go down from that, we just can't go up. And so what staff has prepared right now, it's not been included in your packet because we wanted to walk you through this process and how we got there. But what we have ready now, and I'll distribute it after I get done talking, is the necessary resolution to do that. So what the resolution we have drafted right now essentially sets the goalpost. What it does is cap our mill levy at our current adopted mill, just over 42.3 mills. We couldn't, or excuse me, 43.23 mills. So that would set up the ceiling for us. We do not want to come back, and we feel at this point that there's no need to come back to raise the mill levy. We don't want to raise the mill levy. What this action would do would formalize that cap, and we could not raise the mill levy based on what it currently is right now. We could go back and lower it, but we are now taking that decision into this body's hands rather than leaving it up to Wyandotte County in this state process. So that kind of catches us up on the revenue neutral rate process. I'll pass out the resolutions that I just made mention of. We could take whatever action this body wants to take at this time, but July 12th is kind of that drop dead date that we need to make a decision one way or the other as far as what we're going to notify the county that we're going to do. So as you kind of get your heads around it, I'll pass out that resolution.
I would note that the state exempted itself. The state mill levy stays the same, so they're gonna get 9.63%.
Funny how that works.
They are exempt. I think as Zach passed it out, you know, in summary, I would say the real issue is here, do you want to have control over your budget process or do you want different controls? I mean, you can ultimately set the mill levy, the same thing that you trade if you choose to. But if we want to, I know we have a lot of discussion about roads, so if you want to put assets to roads, and you want to, you know, generate revenue from that, it gives you the opportunity. We have to by statute set some number. We can pick any number we want, but we have to tell the county, this is the maximum rate we're willing to do. And so we've used, you know, our current mill levy based upon past discussions, it seemed to be a max. So I have feelings, you know, think it should be potentially more than that, that's fine too, but I mean, we tried to find something. So with that, Zach has spent a great deal of time on this matter. He's probably our resident expert on this. I know a few of you all have participated in some of the information that LKM has put out there. I think the last meeting we gave him a one pager about kind of the process. So we're happy, Mayor, Council, to answer your questions. We can adopt the resolution. We do have to get the notice.
One thing that I appreciate about this process is, well, we're not the only taxing entity that affects our citizens in Edwardsville. And so this hopefully will bring more accountability to the county, to the community college, to the libraries and school districts, and when they raise mill levies and when they raise really the tax burden as a whole. And that's what the big deal is here, is the tax burden more than a mill levy number. Then one thing that I've felt, and I think most people feel, is just because your home is worth more money doesn't mean automatically the government bills should go up and our expenses should go up. So I appreciate the motivation or the intention behind this, even though it's bringing a lot of headaches and obstacles, and it doesn't take things into consideration that are going to need figured out hopefully sooner than later to make this easier. But I understand the purpose of having more say than the county in our budgeting process, for sure.
I think if you recall, we did, back when we talked about tax burden, different from mill levy. And as you recall, my tax burden standpoint, we're the only ones that have had a tax burden go down. Not to say that taxes haven't gone up, not to say the mill levy, tax burden. So, and you know, nothing new. A lot of entities said, well, we're just not going to change the mill levy. We haven't changed it in years, but that means the tax burden goes up. So over time, you know, we look at more from the tax burden for the very reasons you talked about, right? I mean, there are some costs that go up, and you have to pay for them just because your property value goes up. Doesn't mean all the costs go up at the same time. But our costs go up by 9.63%. Probably not. They go up some, yes. That's what the budget process does. And that's what gives, you know, this governing body the right to make its own local decisions. I think that's the challenge a lot of cities are hearing. Again, I know the mayor was just at the LK mayor's workshop, and I think it's a topic of discussion there around some of these same matters. The implementation, right? The transparency part, I think Zach right with those that we're happy, and probably all of us, we're happy to come up here and justify why we need to spend money, whatever that is. Why is it important to spend this on police, fire, roads, parks, whatever? And we're fine with that and justifying it. A third party there makes the decision for you.
And to your point, Councilmember Kahar, I'm consistently surprised as why this, because I agree, increased accountability for government is a good thing. The focus has seemed to always land on this question of the mill levy, leaving out the valuation piece of it, which is more ambiguous, a little bit more nebulous, harder to get your hands around. Why did my property go up 3% this year versus not going up last year and then going down the year before? There's not been a whole lot of focus from the state perspective that I can see on clarifying that process, which seems to have a more direct linear connection to your taxes versus this is just the rate that we're applying. It's not we're not telling you that a piece of property is worth more or less than it was last year. This is just the rate that the formula is there to get to that end number. So I agree with what your points about accountability, and it just seems also misplaced from the state level.
I think tonight we have to again, happy to have discussion. The key issue in the resolution is the cap on, right? So if we say that the current mill levy is the cap, then that's what we have to look at.
And that's how the resolution has been worded, is that it's a maximum mill levy, a not to exceed amount. Again, similar to how we do set the maximum budget. It tells us how high we can go. It doesn't tell us how low we can go.
Will we know by the next meeting whether we're talking about a $6,500 swing or $250,000 swing?
Well, I might have a little bit more clarity on how they got to that figure, how they got to their R&R rate, but that $250,000 swing, that's the difference. That number's not going to change. So we know we got our audit. We know how much money we received in property taxes in our general fund and in our debt. Well, I could tell you specifically why this number is different, by how much. It's just, I'm not sure what the variables are going into that cap to their formula.
I don't believe they're not taking into consideration and they're not taking into consideration delinquent tax is a tax that's due for more than a year. So somebody could not have paid their 2020 tax. They're not necessarily late. They're late. Not use the word late, but legal standard. They're delinquent after paying 2019. They're not delinquent after 20. They're in the process of getting it. But right now, they're not delinquent. That effectively happens at the same time they certify the new mill or the new value, which is actually November 1. We did it early. Then November 1 is the date that they certify that. So you're going to have some adjustments between now and then, maybe the vote of order or something like that. We had IRBs changing during that time like that. Now the new IRB, they will pull that out, right?
And
part of their numbers,
yeah, their number's not going to change. And the $6,200 swing, that kind of like the best case scenario that it's off, that's still based on the valuation data they gave us in October of 2020. So that's not real numbers. That's here's your valuation based on our processes. You gave us your maximum budget. Based on that, here's your mill levy. So we're not going to know our 2021 revenue until we get our 2021 audit a year from now. So it's all very nebulous and squishy as far as how they're getting to some of these figures. And I understand that they're working with I don't want to throw too many people under the bus, because I understand that they're working through this state process too and trying to apply it as best they can. But the blanket nature of it is going to leave these holes that we just need some more clarity on.
So remind me again, sorry, on the resolution, that third bullet point or third whereas. Could you read that, please?
The third one from the very top.
Correct.
Whereas the revenue neutral rate for the city of Edwardsville was calculated at 39.579146 mils, representing an overall reduction of 3.719414 mils. So what that whereas just is stating, point of fact, What the county has told us is this is your revenue neutral mill levy, which is a reduction of this. It goes on to say under the now therefore be it resolved portion, section 1 is essentially setting that public hearing that we would have before any mill levy is final. And what that does is set it for August 23rd, 2021, which is when we would be typically having our budget hearing anyway. So we'll need to have 2 hearings. And then section 2 is that this governing body expresses its intention to exceed the R&R with a maximum mill levy of what our current mill levy is. So essentially saying we're not going to raise our mill levy. This is the maximum as high as we can go. And then section 3 is the kind of housekeeping bits of publication and notification and things like that.
Is there a potential for any of these numbers changing on July
No.
12th?
No, the count, like we get the preliminary valuations at the beginning of the summer and we get the final valuations at the end of the fall.
Okay.
And we're not in the position from the budget perspective to tell you, here's what we think the mill levy should be at this point. There's a lot of chips that still need to fall as far as, you know, like I mentioned in the last meeting, sales taxes seem to be performing better than we thought. There's the ARP funds that could be reworked and placed back into the general fund, which is going to affect our general fund balance, which is going to have implications on where we think then we could maybe drop the mill levy more if that money can be essentially replaced by those funds. But there's some uncertainty about how exactly you true up that revenue loss that's going to affect some of the things that I'm talking about.
Below the R&R.
I couldn't say for sure right now,
I mean, you said
honestly.
there's the opportunity
In the American Rescue Plan, there are funds that are essentially for making up for lost revenue from 2020. There's a truing up process that I don't think is necessarily settled. If it were to be, you know, depending on how that is structured and whatever, and however this body wants to handle those funds, that's going to affect the fund balance in the general fund, which gives us more leeway to play around with the mill levy, likely down. I couldn't say for sure if it's going to lower it more than 3.7 mils, but lower certainly than what our current mill levy is.
To clarify, if we call for the hearing for this, we can still lower the mill levy or anything we wanted to at the hearing?
Correct. If this resolution were to pass tonight, then all it would do is set the public hearing for August 23rd, 2021, at which point that's when we set the mill levy, and it can go no higher than what it currently is right now. You can set it anywhere below 43.298560 mils.
I think that's a plus, right? They've separated the mill levy discussion from the budget in the sense that once I know what my property tax rates are, oftentimes we don't have the same clarity in sales tax, franchise, because we don't get those until really late in the year. So as you know, in the past, you were adopting a budget in August, and then you find out in October or November that revenues are off, or up or down or whatever. The process does extend our time to adopt the budget.
Right now,
And that is a positive in that sense. You will have more data to make.
right. And now I don't want to belabor the budget process any more than it, and we do a good job of keeping this group updated as, you know, as far as revenue and expenditure indicators. We may be in the point in August where we do the R&R hearing and then we do the budget hearing on the same meeting, which keeps our timeline exactly the same. Like the city manager just mentioned, if we were to notify the county clerk that we wanted to hold our, you know, that we intend on exceeding, that does bump our timeline out a little bit more. And if we, you know, like I said, if there's some more firming up on the American Rescue Plan money, we'll have more data on sales taxes the longer we go. But you know, I don't want to kick the can down the road any longer or unnecessarily longer, but it certainly does give us a wider berth as far as putting together a more accurate revenue and expenditure revenue forecast, especially. We're talking about a mill under this equation is about $82,000. So, somewhere in the range of $300,000 is the swing that we're talking about if we were to keep with the R&R rate as it is now.
To facilitate further discussion about the possibility of accelerating road repairs and that type of thing, I would make a motion that we adopt resolution 2021-10, which gives us the ability, or sets our cap so that we can keep everything in front of the public and have the opportunity to look at what we can do with any excess revenues.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adopt resolution 2021-10. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if there are no further questions, would the clerk please call roll?
And I believe this is a vote of the governing body too, Mayor. So
Okay.
I'll just, to be safe, I'll call on you as well. Adams,
Yes.
Kahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stites.
Yes.
McTaggart.
Yes. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Okay, next item would be city manager report.
Can you scoot that microphone to me so people can hear you?
Okay, sorry about that. One item that's not on the report that I do want to highlight has to do with animal control. As you all know, for many years, we have used Dr. Stofus as our animal facility. And so there's two ways to do that in Kansas. You either contract with the vet and the vet office becomes your animal control facility, or the city has an animal control facility and contracts with the vet to provide those services. So Mr. Stofus is retiring. Dr. Stofus is retiring at the end of June. And we are rapidly trying to find solutions for that. Trying to deal with animal control. Period of time may have to challenge. So we do use another facility for our adoptions. Mobile vet, contract with vet, and facility, Dr. Stofus about use of this facility, lease, purchase. Bottom line, we have to have a vet, and unfortunately, we don't have that. So we're looking at all those. I just want to bring an item that's been on Chief of Police and I plate. The other two things.
Want me to expand on that?
If you have some better
Yeah,
detail.
our rescue, no-kill shelter, we adopted that some time ago with Dolphus, and thus have been using Unleashed Pet Rescue successfully for quite some time. And so we reached out to them in part of our, looking for different options. And they do take direct impound animals from other communities, and they have preliminary agreed, we don't have a contract yet, they have preliminary agreed to take ours as direct impound. That does put some burden on the citizens to go a little ways away to pick up their pets. But all of the kind of the administrative process will be done through the police department as it is now. The burden on the citizen will be to drive to Mission Road and then pick them up from that facility. But we would also take those which are not adopted or reclaimed, and for adoption, we drive them to that place. And so really the couple of things will happen, and I expect that we will enter a contract with them, is that that's a little farther drive. It's not very close to the police either. And we're hoping to use the community service officer a little more on our transports. So we may get creative and overnight holding if we have to, that sort of thing. So I think it's a good option temporarily. We'd like to have them close. Everything that I've been doing, I've talked with Kansas City, Kansas Police Department on some of their options, and they were more than receptive to help us out. But I didn't want to do what other communities have done, is gone out county for a full permanent solution. We want to come back home if we can. We deal with about 60 to 70 animals a year. And over the years, we've had to euthanize very few of them. So it's been a good, successful program that we've had, and we want to continue with that piece, and they've done a real good job for us. So I think temporarily, that's what we'll do. We'll get that contract as soon as they can get it to us, but they've been really receptive. It's just taking a little bit of time to get the communication open on that piece of it. So we're working on it. Again, I think the burden is somewhat inconvenience of going there to get their animals. We do have, I would say it's about 50-50 collection rate. There's a lot of people who, they're either strays, permanent strays, or they're left abandoned. But they've adopted out quite a few successfully, so we're thankful for that. But in a sense that, officers, staff, it's gonna have to go a little farther out. We may have to be creative locally to get a temporary facility, just so we can hold them in the middle of the night if we need to, that sort of thing, weekend, whatever. But we're gonna work that out.
If an animal isn't injured, have we looked into the, is it Anna Powell's, the local facility?
Yeah, and we have addressed it in the past. This is not the first time we've had some obstacles with our veterinarian care, because of health reasons, that sort of thing. But part of what their response has been is that they intermingling outside animals with their kind of business, that they have all kinds of expensive and, favorite pets and things. I think it's probably not a good idea on their end. And so they've been really reluctant to really have that conversation. So we haven't approached them recently, only because in the past we've done that. And it's just kind of it was not looked favorably, just because you have to have all of these other plans, such as what do you do about the, worms and all of the other things that come along, and that may cause them other infections and things, animals who are otherwise healthy. And I think that's what they're scared of.
And have we talked to Humane Society in Wyandotte County?
The one piece of it is that's part of the KCK piece of it. So what we haven't talked to them directly, we have in the past, and they've once again lost their director. So, and that happened to us last time as well. We were right in the midst of having an alternative when the Humane Society lost their director. So they're doing that again. And essentially what happens at KCK is they take them into their facility and they use them as their vet, contracted vet, which we would need, no different than Stolfus provided for us. He just had a facility which you could house them. We would need, if we had a place right here in Edwardsville, we could get a mobile vet. It could be somebody such as from the Humane Society that's come look over the animals and have these plans of disease control. There's several of them. Plans you have to have, such as what happens in a tornado or another disaster. You have to have these kind of things in place. So we have approached them in the past. And once again, we would more than maybe probably not put them there at this point. This is kind of an easy transition for us right now, but that's something we'll come back to. And we'll probably have to talk with it. Right now, I think it's the board directors right running it. I'm not real sure, but they have a director that's absent again. It's a vacant position. So when they get back in place, maybe there's something we can do. And I will say this, Wyandotte County Unified Government, KCKP, they were not opposed to having a lengthy conversation, but it was more of a countywide approach. And again, we're in the preliminary stage of making a transition. We're not ready for the big project yet. So if we can get this piece of it done, then we can go and look back at these other things and maybe there's some other options. My first option was we have to go out of the city to maybe get them to a local Wyandotte County facility. And so that we're going to come back to that. This is just kind of that easy. Let's sign on the dotted line. There's a little bit more cost than we already collect, but mainly we're adopting, like I said, it's probably 50-50 on the adoptions. So that I don't think that fee is going to be so drastic. It's more about the inconvenience of those who have that pet that gets out once in a while. We take it down there. We can't find them, they're not home or whatever, and we put them in, and it's just harder for them to go right.
That's a good reason why you should register your animal with the city and get it chipped, because then when you get it home, that's the reason we don't charge, $2.
$1. We would achieve that want you to have your dog registered or chipped. Chip is the best way, but registration really helps because we have access to that information, even in the field. So
we can return
tell your people, tell your friends.
Yeah, we can return them directly to the house.
That's the best way.
Anyway, I just want to bring it up because it's one of those issues that you have. The only other thing I just wanted to point out is
We've had several staff changes. As you know, Heather, who is our office manager, has taken another position. Predominantly, it had to do, she's working for a university, and it gives her daughter opportunities for education. And we have our lieutenant, his last day is this month. That's Herbert, and he's been with us over 20 years, I think. So he's been great. He's kind of a quiet guy, so he doesn't want any, no fanfare. No fanfare, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up. And unfortunately, we lost somebody in our public works department, but quickly, I won't say got replaced, but we have a new person. They started today. Okay, so only a slight change there, and then we have the different things. But I really wanted to mention both Heather. She's been a great asset to this. One of those always want to do whatever to take care of. And Lieutenant Harmer has been here, thick and thin, good and bad, and all he did. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Zach, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I will touch briefly on the goats. I think I mentioned when I sent out the agenda that we were supposed to be featured on KCTV5, but that's show business, I guess. We got bumped. I've not seen it pop up on any of their online sites, but they have done a really great job. The Goats on the Go have done a really great job. They've really cleaned that area up very nicely. I definitely want to continue that relationship that we've got with this company. It's a local company. Goats on the Go is off of Kansas Avenue. And really just kind of using that as the CPPS board and this body has said that we want to continue to work towards Stony Point restoration. What I told KCTV5, and that's whenever we did speak, was that, ideally, if we could have a Memorial Day service in 2022 at the Stony Point Cemetery, then that would delight me to no end. We've got some access issues. We've got obviously some little bit more cleanup issues, but I think the momentum that the Goats had, that was really great. The only other thing I'll mention that we did have our vaccination event at the community center this past week. Only got about 35 people who came, which I was a little disappointed based on our amount of outreach. I was hoping it would be between that, around that 100 mark. But it was a lot of school age children though, which was that was encouraging to hear from the health department. They seemed to be, they'd like to get 200 people in every single site, but they seem to be pleased with the 35 folks that we got. And I do want to thank City of Bonner Springs. They loaned out Tiblo Transit for us on the day of the event, so that was really kind of a cross Wyandotte County, City of Edwardsville site, health department resources, and the Bonner Springs helped provide some transportation options for our folks. So thanks to everybody who helped pull that together. But that's all I've got, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with the council reports, and Chuck, we'll start with you.
110th Street, where you talked about BPU said there wasn't a leak up there. I remember several meetings ago, we had asked it, and you had said that you guys were going to reach out to BPU and have that ground tested, or somebody from BPU look at it to confirm. Has that been done?
Yeah, as I said earlier, it was done, and they said they pressure tested it, and they said that it was not. I still don't 100% know. It could be in a tap. I wonder, but they did.
So we don't know.
We're now playing on.
They came out and said it is not.
But we're not sure if there is or isn't a leak.
Well, I just question,
We have
it
water.
seems like an odd situation.
We have water.
With the water there, and not a other source unless there's a spring or something over there. So as we patch that, we're gonna probably use like a do a little more excavation than normal patch.
What's the time frame on that road getting repaired? We've been hearing about this for quite some time, and I know that there's a process and you got to get things done, and BPU had to come out, and you don't want to patch over if there was a leak, or, I mean, I know, but what is the time frame that looks like that's going
Well,
to
they
get
said we
addressed?
have some turnover there in the department, which is 50% of the staff, but we should be up again 50% on Thursday. So hopefully with that, I'm thinking in the next couple weeks here, if we get some dry weather. 2 weeks.
Good. 98th and Riverview, I called Mike and let Mike know. I'm not sure what's going on. That's now turned this into a place to come down there and do donuts and burnouts and drive fast. There was the speed trailer up there that was set up after last month's meeting or last 2 weeks ago's meeting. I'm not sure if that trailer has the capability of determining if people are speeding or not, or is it just flashes and then they slow down and goes on? Don't know.
There's a warning system doesn't count for.
So we probably need to see about, because it's taken off again. I'm not sure that if we have the cameras that we had said that we were going to use, if that 98th and Riverview could be a place that maybe cameras get used and find out what the heck's going on, because they're speeding, still speeding, and still driving crazy in that intersection.
That's what I've been doing. Actually, I talked. Somebody's out there doing donuts. Sometimes they still very, very good. See, make a report. You haven't had any reports of somebody directly falling. It sure helps. Cameras there's one's completely broken. The other one is in repair, and I don't know if it's been returned yet. And the other one is deployed. Just a matter of, it's never in the right spot. Seems like. So, we'd like to improve those. They're okay. They're not great. We'd like to do better with them. Those cost money. So we'll address that maybe in the budget to look at other options.
We could have steered $650,000 towards some cameras. That's all I have.
Margaret?
So, Zach, thank you again for putting together the presentation for the mill levy implications and the revenue neutral rate. I'm excited. Hopefully we can bring that down below 40 mils. That's interesting about the impounding of the animals, whether it be dogs, cats. Could that be some information put out on the website? People probably need to have an idea that's coming around that, right, on all the avenue streams. Gets back to the whole communication piece. Where's our sign? 110th, the sign, where is it located now?
Right now, it's posted on our temporary sign is just up north a little bit, because we were letting folks know about the vaccination, and then now there's a notification up there just telling people not to set off fireworks on city property. So it's just up the road a little bit along 4th Street in the little area we've got.
And I did volunteer down at the vaccination, and there was 2 people that saw that on the sign. So
Well, good.
excited. I know, I was excited for that. And I think the health department said that low numbers probably were, most of the pharmacies are offering the shots now.
Right. Which is
Saturday
good.
was what they liked. I
Mhm.
mean, but the pharmacies, and that's where they're gonna have to go. A lot of the people asked if their second shot's gonna be here, but
Right. Mm-hmm.
they were instructed they have to go to either through a pharmacy or the Kmart location. Excited for these street projects. We're all excited for these. Thank you, right. Thank you for your hard work. You know what needs to be done, so. That's all I have.
Thank you, Margaret. Garrett?
Mike, Tyler was talking about the funds that are sitting that aren't being used right now, and what the penalty or whatever, what was the word that you used? We're cool on that, right? We're Edwardsville.
Yes, we have to do a calculation. I don't remember the exact timing. I think at the end of 3 years, 5 years thereafter. So effectively, when arbitrage, what happened back in the 80s, really, in New York City was one that did. So what was happening is governmental entities were borrowing money, and because it's tax exempt money, they could borrow at a very low interest rate. Then they were investing the money in a high interest rate environment, and they were taking those interest earnings and using them to pay off the rate.
This out of New York, you say?
I think that's how New York got into its bankruptcy. But effectively, not the fact they were borrowing money, investing the money, and never really using the money for projects, and they were making interest. So they passed federal laws that says you can't basically make interest. You can make it a little, but there's a calculation that says, hey, if you borrow it at 1%, you put it in the bank at 5%, then we're gonna call that a taxable bond. And then bonds and then the bondholders.
The reason I went that,
You don't want to get
the reason I went that direction is the county by any chance sitting on the money that the railroad is delaying on the silent crossing? Is there money set aside there that could be in the midst of an arbitrage?
they have money supposedly set aside, but I don't know.
It's been,
I don't know what the basis. I don't know if it.
you know, that I'm beating that
aside.
horse again on those silent
No, I
crossings.
sent them again today and say, what is it? We're having a pre-construction meeting, why are we not moving forward? Who's not doing it?
Well, that just, when they said that arbitrage, I never had heard that word before. When they said that.
It's
I
a
thought,
word that you generally shouldn't have to worry about. If you see that in your audit, it's probably not a good idea.
I didn't know what that meant at all.
That's what Sean and I and Zach will take care of you.
Well, I just wanted to kind of clear it up for me. Dusty, I wanted to say that I think that you're doing an excellent job on what you're doing. And when you're talking about the deep patch repairs, you know, the deep repairs and all that, I think that's definitely the preliminary on all the street repairs that do need to be done. And I think if you fix the foundation of it, then, you know, I think the bigger repairs will be a lot easier when you do that. And that's why I think that the resolution that we passed is a good thing, because I think you're putting things kind of in order on that. I do understand that the streets are a horrible mess. I'm not going to disagree with that whatsoever. But I also think that some of our facilities are in that kind of a condition too, that, you know, I really think that we need to consider that as well as the streets. And I think plans are getting put together to make that work pretty well. What about, is there any chip seal that it can be done anymore for temporaries, or does anybody do chip seal anymore?
I think that's what we're using, this new product Onyx, right?
Which is more expensive?
Chip seal is a little more expensive, I think. I mean, that's 50 cents a dollar. So probably.
Near a dollar more. Near a dollar more. Exact.
But it has places where it can be used, right? Any of those products, I mean, any of those things are made, you know, they're to preserve the chip seal, seal coat, quantity versus a mill and overlay is also a type of preservation that gives you a new driving surface. And for reconstruction is kind of the, you know, it deals with the broader issue.
Yeah, right, and that's, you know, I'm not trying to get into your business whatsoever, but I do want to see the additional, you know, the monetary part of it work out well, you know, all the way around. If there's money sitting back that needs to be spent on the projects, I think we're heading the right direction on that, on doing that. And, you know, if we can do anything for our employees, you know, if we're losing the employees right and left, but I think if there's anything that we can do to keep them happy here to where they don't go somewhere, you know, why not? That's what we need to do. And put the streets on a priority, plus put our staff and facilities on a priority. And on the dogs, is there any kind of way there can be an interlocal with Bonner on that? What does Bonner Springs do, or is that?
They're shipping them to Lansing, Humane Society of Lansing.
Okay.
Well, that sounds pretty permanent. Never really approached them about maybe a joint effort. We had in the past, in the sense that they have decided to take theirs to the Humane Society. I believe it is in Lansing.
Okay, I just came to my head on that because there's the interlocal on that. And you said something about West Kansas Avenue. Being that you're talking about where public works is going on down to the Hollis. What was the thoughts on that street?
Again, I really did just some full depth patching. That far end has a very bad side to it. The right of way actually extends quite a way south. Hopefully maybe some grading on that side hill.
Cool. All right, that's all. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Carolyn?
I have a short list. I'll try to make it quick. One thing that's come up a few times is the equipment outside of the building at 110th and, well, the old ambulance building. Is there a possibility of moving that down to the park or somewhere where it's not at the entrance of that neighborhood?
I don't know what, I mean, we don't have much, I mean, it's space, right? Now, I will say this, we continue to look at part of the 2019 project, right? Did look to do acquisition, some form of property acquisition, specifically for public work. And because this is the issue is, I mean, as we do more and we acquire more equipment, then it's where do you put it? And that's because of exactly what you said. We can try to look at other options. We use some local, we had local, winter storage where somebody has a large barn type facility where we can park it when we're not using it. Right now, a lot of that being used interchangeably.
Right. Well, and I mean, not so much the stuff that's inside, but the stuff that's sitting outside of the building. And so it seems to me that we could park it in the parking lot just as easily as in the parking lot up there, if it's more burdensome to the neighbors, since there's no neighbors right next to the park. So if maybe you guys could just kick around the idea and I'll get to that.
There are some housekeeping issues that we could do there as
Okay.
well. We've had a septic issue up there also, so we kind of got.
Okay. That's fine.
We got a couple of things.
Okay. Well, yeah, if you guys maybe just kick around the idea, you wouldn't even need to necessarily report back if you have a solution, but I thought they could sit outside, maybe down by the industrial park or in our park, easier than up there. So.
The spreaders and stuff, they are keeping, that's the part of trying to keep as much.
Okay, great. Let's see. To get back to streets, and I know that's everybody's sore subject here. I think it's vital that we address the streets, and that's why I asked you on the timeline of 102nd Street or Kansas Avenue, Richland, some of these, and you said we'd be looking at some of them the next 2 weeks, maybe before the next meeting, we'll have 110th Street fixed. And then this fall, we're looking at some of the other ones up north. What I don't want to do is do a lot of temporary repairs that we're going to have to just dig back up and do complete revamps of or overhauls. And so if you maybe even at the next meeting, just keep us posted. Hopefully we'll have a report. Yeah, 110th Street's done. But on a fall, if we could get a timeline, what months those other streets are going to be hit would be fantastic. And I know it is not necessarily in concrete and it's weather driven, but I think it's really beneficial for folks to see a timeline on those. And when we're talking about budgets, and Councilman Adams mentioned this, and I know Councilman Stipes had mentioned too, we've got to do something about getting if it's a capital improvement, that's okay, but we've got to get the streets under control. Zach, do you have something to
Just a quick
add?
to add to that, I pulled up the 6-year rotation plan that Dusty had presented a couple meetings back, which again it's a moving target. But all of the streets that were noted in the comments earlier are on the docket are on this rotation plan within the next 2 to 3 years, which is typically it's the surface seal program, which typically follows the crack seal program. And this is outside of the regular maintenance that his crews are doing and scheduled that we talked about tonight. So there are definitely, all that to say is they are on our radar. There's a plan in place to get to them and perform those kind of long-term fixes. And there's going to be short-term fixes in the meantime, but I do, to your point, I do want people to be aware of that maintenance plan and rotation plan that is going to, the road work's going to be continuing in an ongoing process. And that's just to put that out there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's one thing. I mean, we can go back and talk about old projects, but that was one reason I wanted to see some of the more troublesome streets repaired before Riverview Crossroads and some of the things that we're doing. And that's okay. That's where we're at. But if we could maybe target the streets most in need for our upcoming projects and kind of work from worst case scenario too. And I know there's some things are cheaper and easier to do faster, but if we can just keep seeing that progress and a plan, and if it's budgeting, bring it to us so we can talk about it. Almost done. Few people are leaving. I think it's vital that if it's at all possible to get exit interviews for those folks. What did they love about working here and what can we do better? What would have made maybe their life a little bit easier? A lot of times as they're going, they might have some fresh perspective and different ideas that would be beneficial to the departments. We will miss Heather, and congratulations to Lieutenant Hermrich on his retirement. That's fantastic, and please thank him for his service to us. Gosh, I think I'm almost done. July 10th is our next Edwardsville Mobile Pantry event coming up. We will have registration open for that. There's signups online already, and Zach, I think, is working on getting the sign up out as well. So if you know any families in the area that would benefit from some groceries, some extra groceries, just have them sign up. The sign up deadline is July 7th. And that is the end of my comments.
I'm just gonna follow a little bit on your road project, your road.
Yeah.
Your comments. You know, some of them, because we were doing the Riverview Crossroads project, some of the timing was to make sure we did go do something and have it torn up by that road. So we know some of the things like Riverview, Richmond and stuff like that, we're gonna need more attention. But I think one of the things that Dustin's also done, that some of these roads are closed, we're able to go in and we'll have lighter traffic, we brush clearing, drainage stuff, we're looking how we can do those things as well. So I think you'll see some things, so to speak, on the north side, after that project is complete, years completion, we can do a following year. And again, Riverview Avenue, probably great for the Onyx, and I think it's scheduled for next year, I don't remember, or maybe you got, but there's some other roads, so we're trying to, we're also trying to be logistical projects, when 98 we're going to be diverting traffic, so it's kind of fix them before, after the project. The other thing I would just bring up is just recent discussions with the Scannell folks over on 110th Riverview. Part of it, I know Tyler had to go to Bonner tonight with that, but one of the things that they have in their, I guess, agreement is improvements to Riverview from basically the end of our project to the west boundaries of that property or somewhere thereabouts. And some of that's really, really bad. We have worked with them a little bit of saying, well, why would we go in and spend money to do some temporary work that, that we were going to have to tie the road down to the existing road. And so they're going to, instead of doing that, we're going to do a little work on our side and reimburse it for and take it forward. So trying to coordinate that. I mean, that won't fix all of Riverview, but and I realize that road technically is in Bonner, but we have residents up there, and people drive through there to go to the golf course or to the parks, get over to Bonner Springs to Walmart and that back way. So that project will be following the lane right behind. We may not even, they're even tying our project. That's not at our cost, it's not our project, but I think it's a good way to coordinate that. Just wanted to put that out.
Chief Whittam, it says you gave testimony at the KU Fire Training Program. Could you?
That's the validation process. The International Fire Service Accreditation Congress, the national certification system, comes in and does an audit review about every 4 years when it brings programs into the field. So I was selected to represent the volunteer combination officers of this region when it comes to reviewing their curriculum, how well the job the KU training program does, if you see any training identification labs between such as community college training program, certification program, and what we have out in the field.
Great, thank you. It's nice to have somebody on the staff that is revered like that. I would recommend on the billboard is advertising July 1st, your POHO Express event. If we could switch that right away, get that out since it's 2 days away, 3 days away, whatever that is. And I would encourage all of us to participate in that, set an example for the community. It's a very good cause. One of the things that's been on my mind a lot lately is the zip code issue. We've talked about that. We've wondered about the revenue, if we're capturing all of our revenue that could possibly be captured because of the zip code. I contacted the regional district or the district office about this, and the lady there was really nice. Where is her name? She has been there for, it's Monica Hernandez. She's been there for 28, 32 years, something like that. She's retiring, unfortunately, at the end of August. And so they are presently going through a reorganization, national reorganization with the post office. So there really wasn't anything that could be accomplished at this point in time. She didn't give me any great hope. I was thinking maybe we could expand 66113 to the city boundaries. And she was familiar with our situation. And she said, yeah, 10 years ago, your mayor wrote and asked for us to do this. We rejected it then. And so, but anyway, she's very pleasant and recommended that we wait till after the reorg, maybe November, just to initiate a request. She did say, however, that she would be more than willing to do a block range to do, I guess you designate, Beach Street from this number to this number is Edwardsville. And so what'll happen is when it comes up on the national address board, it'll come up as Edwardsville, not as KCK. And so she said it's a block range report. Sounds like you do it in an Excel spreadsheet. And she said if she would get that within the next few weeks, she would take it as a personal project to update that. Yes.
I'll get it.
Okay. So, but she said, possibly after the reorg, you might have a slight chance, but she wasn't very hopeful about it, although she was empathetic to the situation. But that block range, at least the Postal Service, if you Google it, it'll come up as Edwardsville. Those addresses will. And maybe for the taxing entities and all that kind of stuff, for the software, taxing software and so forth. So anyway, that's where we stand with that. And hopefully we can at least get a little bit more identity for the city uniquely in Wyandotte County.
And I apologize. So I think also we had a promotion within the fire department. No, we won't do that. We got to sign. Kevin, everybody's aware, retired first. We're at the end of May. John Stegman was the driver on D shift, also a paramedic going into that role. Last October, being interviewed, assessment center process, we brought in Deputy Chief Bonner Springs, Deputy Chief Sean E., the Assistant Chief from KCK, and then who else? We have one more. Bonner we have representatives all around the metro that sit on the assessment center, and they conveyed that John was our best candidate. Made his temporary acting title a permanent position, so he's now the captain on B shift. He's also first paramedic captain that we have within the organization. As we talked before, we would take 15 paramedics. They did get them, so we enticed our personnel to also keep their medical license got their career. So John's kind of the poster child, the guinea pig, and one of those that you just have to play around with how it occurs. Medication.
Yeah, Leavenworth, Battalion Chief, Leavenworth City.
Thank you, Mayor.
I have one more comment. I'm so sorry. One more question. How many fireworks seems to be?
Three.
And they all get their permits?
Yes.
They pay the sales tax or whatever, we get the sales tax from their sales?
I can provide, I think I can provide some.
Do they? Do we normally have three?
That's all we are allowed to have total is three.
Because of the size of our city?
That is just something that the council, before I got here, said that they
Oh,
were,
really?
they want to have three listeners. So this is the first year and four we're back up. And
So we
had
won't
two.
have one right next to each other? I'm kidding. You see it.
No, they do.
Well, we do have two right next to each other, near Mark's Motorcycles. They've got a stand. You probably think it's one stand, but they've got two right next door to each other, but it's two separate stands. And the other one's over by the BP's. Yes, ma'am.
Is that our city ordinance?
Yes, ma'am. I think that's a,
it ties to the state statute.
correct.
Limited time that they start from.
It's become my least favorite holiday. I've already heard them.
Who,
That's
Yeah.
all the points.
to say nothing of all the trash just left in the street, but yeah,
Can you shoot them?
not technically, no.
Every year.
Well, somebody thought they.
Following July 4th, almost every year after, I will get, or we will get several letters that says, you should never have fireworks in, and we'll have several people that get on and say, what a crazy idea, you know, always laugh, so. It's just one of those issues.
I have one last thing to say. We all sit up here and we're elected by the Edwardsville citizens. And I don't think that because someone disagrees or has a different viewpoint, that they should be disrespected. I think this is a place that we vet out our concerns, our comments, our questions, but I don't think that's appropriate to have someone talk down to you or yell at you in a meeting, public meeting. That's all I'll say.
I have nothing further to submit, so we are adjourned.